Hello and a warm welcome to St George's Anglican Church, Paris, for this 5-minute reflection. This week, on Friday the 23rd of April, it's the feast day of our patron George. We know very little about the historic St George, apart from his being born in Asia Minor, to which he returned after a successful military career in the Roman army. He left the military not because he had become a Christian, but because the moral standards by which he was working created a tension between him and his colleagues, which meant that they pressured him to leave. So he returned to Asia Minor and did good things, including, of course, the story of George and the Dragon. There are lots of stories in the pagan world of princesses tied to rocks needing to be rescued by handsome heroes. And clearly the tellers of the story of St George, his faith and his following of Christ, was shaped by those expectations. Expectations shape the way in which we tell the story. We relay reality around us. I've come across that experience on my coming to France and discovering that in the proud inheritor of Cartesianism, there is a need to have the theory worked out before you approach the problem. And that's come as something of a surprise to me, being from an Anglo-Saxon tradition that sees a problem and works out a solution on a pragmatic and entirely non-theoretical basis. Of course, both approaches have their strengths and their weaknesses, but expectations, nonetheless, inform the ways in which we come to deal with life's problems, the way in which we seek solutions. Theology is a way of seeking solutions. It used to be known as the Queen of Sciences, but certainly in the Anglo-Saxon world it has been dethroned because it can't prove its utility. How, as a theologian, do you make life better? Perhaps in France it's philosophy and psychotherapy that have taken the place of theology as the church steps to one side. Theology is, of course, about simply talking about God in order that we can understand God's own self and God's own self's relating to us. In order that we can understand God's love, because Christians believe that God is love. In order that we can understand God's love for our neighbour and our responsibility to our neighbour. In order that we can understand God's overwhelming commitment to us in love. And we do theology in order that we can fall in love, and that our love of God can mature and deepen and sustain us throughout our lives. That we can act as if we, so that not only can we be in love, but that we can act as if we are in love with God and our neighbour. Theology then isn't for wimps. It's not because the landscape through which we and St George traverse is dominated by the cliff faces of rigid fundamentalism, the arid defiles of scepticism and the swamps of sentimentality, all pitfalls for us in the 21st century when we want to talk about God, but because, like St George, when we are able to speak about God, we are able to give a convincing account of why we believe, just like St George, in the true and living God, in whom we place all our hope. God bless.